Friends, it's a fag end of the day, and I'll be kind of sending a lot of knowledge bits. So, one is to start with, I focused on cryptocurrencies based on blockchain. So, when I say digital currency security, we will focus on some of the aspects which are specially built on blockchain as a technology. Since this was a world blockchain event, I didn't kind of really ventured into other digital currencies which are kind of available in the wallets. That is one. From a storyline perspective, what I would like to do is I'll just quickly touch upon the overview, what exactly it is. I mean, for some of you, it will be a very natural thing to understand what a cryptocurrency over a blockchain would mean, but for some, it might be a kind of refresher. We'll spend maybe half a minute on that. Then we'll talk about some of the compromises, biggest compromises that have happened so far in this arena. We'll take a look at what are the key security challenges. So what I want you guys to take back is whenever you want to invest or get onto some platform, at least you will have an opinion, you will have an analysis of yours that what are the key things from an architectural standpoint you should be looking at for that particular digital currency or the platform for that matter. And then recommendations on approach. What can be the recommendation specific to the Bitcoin provider, the platform itself, and the recommendations for the consumers who are going to buy the coins. So let's go a quick overview of the market cap. If you look at this, is a 2 days back kind of a view which talks about 7 top cryptocurrencies. If you look at the market cap, I mean Bitcoin is going on $8,000+, while Ripple is kind of emerging right now. I mean it went to $3, it has come back to 0.68. So this is a kind of a quick glimpse of what it really looks like. And apart from, I mean, these are the 7 top. I mean, there are multiple players who are kind of getting submerged into this play. I want to quickly touch upon this. Many of you would already be aware of the entire process, how it works, but just for a few of them who might want to kind of refresh, what happens typically on a blockchain when you kind of transact? So one is, say for example, Alice wants to kind of send a Bitcoin to Bob. So she uses her private key and Bob's public key. So when I want to spend something, I'll use my private key, and when I want to accept the money, I'll use the public key. So she triggers a transaction of 1 BTC to Bob's public key. Now this transaction, once I send a transaction, it's broadcasted to all the nodes. So all the nodes get this transaction. So miners are kind of on a lookout for getting these transactions. So when they get these transactions, they kind of put them in a stack, which is called as a block, and then they mine the block. So when I say mine the block, it's all about they kind of creating a hash value, and there's a competition. So to kind of solve this puzzle and get the right hash value. So every 10 minutes there is a new target which is set, and all the miners, they have to kind of derive a hash value which is kind of either less or equal to the target. So once they do that, the miner will kind of publish this block, and the rest of the miners typically will be verifying whether whatever he has sent is in the right context. And once we get a majority consensus from all the miners, this block is accepted, right? And once the block is accepted, which means that the Bitcoin is kind of transferred from Alice to Bob. Now, typically, all the blocks, they will have references to the previous block, right? So that's the reason it's called. So the reason I'm kind of setting this kind of a tone here is because next challenges and the next set of topics that we are going to talk about is specifically aligned to this theory. So now let's take a look at the biggest compromises. So empty Gox. I mean, it should not be empty, it should be Mount Gox, but by virtue of what has happened to that, this was one of the biggest exchanges in Japan. And around 2010, so very few people know that it was hacked twice. So in 2011, almost 2,609 Bitcoins were lost. So what happens is hackers got the access, or rather the credentials of the auditor. And using those credentials, they were able to kind of hack this. Apparently, in the beginning of 2014, there was again a larger attack on the same exchange, and which amounted to almost 740,000 bitcoins, amounting to almost $350 million. So that was the kind of an outlook. They had to declare, they had to file a bankruptcy, and they had to kind of move on. Similar case was with the Bitfloor. So in this case, what happened was there were unencrypted private keys which was kept on their servers online. So this was a kind of a vault they had which was not protected, and these private keys were hacked by the hackers, and as a matter of fact 24,000 bitcoins were lost. They were able to refund that back, and apparently they continued with their operation, but I think there was a kind of a problem. With Polonix, there was a faulty code in their withdrawal module. So once I want to withdraw my Bitcoin, so that code was faulty. So the hackers somehow came to know about that and exploited that particular thing. By doing that, they were able to kind of almost, so the number is not yet disclosed, but they said 12.3% of the entire of their BTCs were kind of hacked. And apparently they kind of told all their stakeholders that every wallet is going to have this burden of 12.3, and a cut of 12.3 was kind of published. But apparently after a year or so, they kind of revamped and they kind of refunded the money back. They were able to continue with their operations. Coming to Bitstamp, so even this was one of, not a very big one, but a smaller kind of an attack with a loss of 19,000 BTCs. Bitcoin Gold is a bit of an interesting story. So what Bitcoin was kind of forked into two. So the next fork for a Bitcoin was Bitcoin Gold. It launched in 24th. As soon as it was launched, there was a denial of service attack, which longed almost for a week or so, and then they kind of got back. After that, on 20th of November 2017, it was attack on their wallet. Kind of a faulty wallet was kind of hosted on some website, and then that got hacked. $3.3 million worth of Bitcoins were lost. Post that again on 26th of November, there was a Windows wallet installer which was kind of infected. So everyone who downloaded the new version of their wallet, even they got impacted. So I mean, while all this is happening, Bitcoin Gold is still there. I mean, they have not kind of gone out of the race. But I mean, these are some of the biggest compromises which I wanted to kind of touch upon. Now we will get into specifics of challenges with regards to these major attacks. So before I get into these, I mean, typically what would be a key loophole or a key pain point for these operators when they talk about the attacks? So I would like to just talk about one thing. Whenever there is this is the premise when I started with. Once I spend some money from block 1 to block 2 to block 3, multiple miners will jump on to kind of get that transaction and mine the block. So what happens is there are multiple forks which are created. Now, creation of these forks is basically the opportunity for the attackers, for the hackers. So this is how they will be in a position to kind of do a double spending. So if we look at what a double spending kind of or a race attack would mean, I hope is this visible? Not very much. Okay, but let me try to explain. So for example, what a client can do, a dishonest client can do is, he will initiate a transaction with a vendor to buy something. And then he will also initiate a transaction to kind of send the same money to himself or herself. And then he has a kind of this adversary has a hash power of greater than, say, probably rest of the miners. So when I say greater than rest of the miners, typically it will be 50% and above of the network or computing power is with this kind of people. So what happens is he will send this particular transaction to the vendor. Vendor will wait for typically 2 or 3 confirmations. I mean, as a ground rule, after getting 3 confirmations, he might kind of deliver the services. Now, this person is not going to add this particular transaction So this particular transaction is added in block 1 and block 2 of the public network, right? And the below is the one which he is mining himself. In his mine, he is not including that particular transaction. Now he is far ahead in the game with this particular hash power. And once he reaches block 3 and block 4, where he has specified that this particular bitcoins are kind of coming back to my own wallet, he publishes these 4 blocks. And since this is the longest block size, this gets accepted. So this is how kind of a double spending attack typically happens. It's a very fundamental and basic kind of a scenario of a double spending attack. Now, if it comes to Finney attack, typically what happens is, when a miner is mining a block, he will write a transaction that certain amount of bitcoins is kind of sent to himself, and he mines the block with this transaction, but he does not publish this block. He is not publishing this block. Immediately after that, he sends those amount of bitcoins to some vendor. He buys to some merchant, he buys some services. After 2-3 confirmations, he get back, the services are kind of delivered to him, while the long chain that he already has created with the coins sending back to himself, he will immediately publish that. So that is a withholding of a blockchain, and he's kind of publishing that entire stuff, and then he kind of steals that overall coins. Now, this is a typical example. I'm just jumping on to selfish mining. I'll talk about brute force and greater than hash, 50% hash. So typically these miners don't work in isolation. They will always work in collaboration. They will have some pool where they will mine, keep on mining. And typically whenever they adopt a block to be mined, the work gets distributed between these miners. So even the reward that they kind of get, even that gets distributed. The number of hashing a particular miner will do, a particular node will do, equivalent amount of share they will get. In such kind of environment, when there is a selfish mining attack, so what is a selfish mining attack? Suppose I am a part of a pool. At the same time, I am running my private blockchain. So I am running my private hash center where I am having my private computing power. I contribute to the pool, but late. I don't contribute on time. So what I do is, I get the inputs from all the other contributors. So once these contributors contribute that these are the values or this is the hash function that they have derived, and once I get that, I don't disclose what I have. I take all of that and then I start mining it privately. When I get that result, basically I publish the entire of that blockchain which is privately mined. I publish it on the public net as if it is mine, and this is not disclosed, right? Post that, whatever is the outcome for my specific block that I was mining in the shared manner, I publish to the pool. Now this is of no use to them because the block is already being published and you already have got a reward for that particular block. Now this is a very sensitive case because what happens is all the computing power that the pool has invested in has gone waste. So nor he gets from a pool, nor the entire pool gets anything. So this is how typically block 3 and block 4 gets kind of added to the public blockchain. Now, talking about a brute force attack. Brute force attack is predominantly for your private keys. Now, if you look, if you ask me whether is it possible, it is possible, but the likelihood of this getting done, because you look at the permutation and combination that a person, it's a 32-byte kind of a code. And it will take years for him to kind of do all the permutation and combination to kind of really get that private key. But the way the consumers create their private keys, that is the issue. So when it comes to you, if you want to create your own private key, you need to ensure that it's extremely secured. And the moment you have a 32-bit with your SHA, 256 SHA kind of a thing with a passphrase, it's not a very big game. I mean, it can be kind of brute forced and it can be attacked. Anyone can pull that out. So ideally, if you're taking care of that, then I think this brute force attack will not be possible. I mean, at least with the given infrastructure that we have right now, it is not possible that way. Going forward with the cloud computing coming on, it can be still one of the options that hackers might look at. Now, greater than 50% power or gold finger attack is the one where, if you look at it, there are multiple pools who are mining these blocks. At this point in time, there are 4 major miners. All the 4 major miners are in China. Now, if these 4 get together, just imagine if these 4 get together, they are more than 51%. What can happen? So they can do anything. I mean, they can create a complete instability in the Bitcoin network. They can kind of change the blocks, whatever they prefer. They can kind of isolate some of the honest miners. Anything can happen in that case. So that is the greater than 50% hash power attack. I mean, if you ask me, has this attack happened? No. This kind of attack has not yet happened. So rest of the attacks, double spending, Finney attack, all these are kind of happening. But I'm telling you, the intensity of this attack is far more that we think right now. Now coming to network related attacks. Now one is a bribery attack. I mean, it's very, given the ecosystem that we have, we are kind of prone to bribery. Now there are 3-4 things that can happen here. One is out of band bribery. So it's a very legal term to be used in this Bitcoin context, where the settlement of this bribe happens out of the context, and then there are certain miners who are kind of aligned with this person, and all these blocks are processed based on his inputs. So he can control these miners, and whatever transactions he wants to discard, he wants to include, can be done based on his inputs. Second way of doing a bribery attack is by manipulating the fees. So every transaction I do, I include a fee in it. It's not necessary I spend a fee all the time. It's not a mandate as per the Bitcoin or cryptocurrency protocol. Passing a fee is not a, but higher the amount of fee will always attract miner to pick my transaction first. So with that, they will have an awesome, I mean, just surplus amount of fees included in that, so that miners can pick up and start working on it. Third way is an in-band kind of a thing, where the miners can create a different fork. So I talked about a fork, right? You can create a fork. Now in this fork, they will include the bribery Bitcoins. So whoever picks up that particular fork to be mined, he will get those Bitcoins for free. So that is the understanding. So he can do that basically. So that is an attack when it comes to bribery. Refund attack. Coming to, you can stop me if you don't kind of get it. Okay, this is also very, it's not readable, right? I'll explain you that. So typically, the premise of refund attack is the merchants can refund you the money even if you send an alternate private key, alternate Bitcoin address on a different channel. So when I say a different channel, I can send the merchant my alternate Bitcoin address on email and say, okay, I could not get this particular delivery, please, I don't want this delivery rather, and please send me back. What happens is, just for an example, just take, there is a trader who is a rogue trader. This rogue trader is going to have a kind of a website which publishes all the services and at a very attractive rates. Typically, smart people will figure out that it's a scam, but some people might not, and they will fall prey to it. And what will happen is, they will try to buy services on this particular website. Now, this particular rogue trader is connected with a merchant, with a real merchant, right? So the moment the person tries to pay, gets to pay now, the request goes to the merchant website, and from there a real packet of accepting a payment is forwarded to the customer. Customer sees that, he feels happy, this is an authentic website. This is what I wanted, right? And then he tries to initiate a payment. He does the payment, whereas he is paying for something which the rogue trader is going to buy. So the payment is happening to the rogue trader. Now he just gets on this rogue trader website, he just gets a confirmation. It's a dummy confirmation that your payment is done and you will get the services. Once this is done, this guy initiates a refund, and this refund is on a different Bitcoin address. So it's a very simple and straightforward thing. There's no hassle out here. Easy money for this rogue trader. So this was about refund. Now there are punitive and feather flocking kind of transactions where the intent is to blacklist some of the users altogether from the, and this can be a lot of intent behind discarding some of the transactions from honest block miners or honest customers. So what happens is, if a person is having a hash 50 or 50% more hash computation power, he can declare that I am not going to take any transactions from, for example, Alice in that sense, and he kind of discards all the blocks, say block 3 and block 4, if they are containing that transaction, he will discard and he will rewrite the block 3 and block 4 and republish it again. So he has the power to kind of completely isolate a user in that sense. Transaction malleability is something which is very interesting. So what happens is, your input from where I got the Bitcoin, the output where I am sending the Bitcoin, and the hashtag basically, you cannot tamper with that. It's all kind of tied together. So you cannot change that and you cannot tamper with that. But your transaction ID, I mean right from the beginning, this transaction ID has been kind of a dilemma for many. And so for example, let's again talk of Alice and Bob. Alice and Bob has been famous in examples for Bitcoin. So for example, Alice has sent one Bitcoin to Bob and the transaction ID is AA, for example. What happens is, Bob, he can actually go and change this transaction ID. So he can change the transaction ID to say BB. What happens is, he has a good hash computing power. What he will do is, he will change this transaction ID and publish this block with transaction ID as BB to everyone. Now, apparently, the source and destination is same, only the transaction ID is different. So Bob anyways gets his 1 Bitcoin, right? Now, for Alice, in her client software, she is not able to find a transaction named AA. So Bob comes back to Alice and says, I have not received your money because your transaction is lost somewhere. So apparently she tries to find out AA, but she never gets AA. Finally she thinks, okay, it might have got missed somewhere, and she again repays Bob. So I am talking only about one BTC here, 1 Bitcoin, but you just imagine the impact. If this happens, it can be a major impact. So this needs to be kind of managed. So wallet theft, I think it's known. I mean, I don't need to kind of speak too much about it. I mean, so many hacks have happened on so many exchanges just on wallet. We will talk about how it can be kind of made more secure in forthcoming slides. But this is the most important weak link, if you ask me, from a customer endpoint perspective. Now, time jacking is something which is recently kind of emerged. What happens is, all these nodes are across the globe, and what happens, there can be a play between the timestamps for any hacker, and he can drop the packets, drop the blocks basically, or insert his own blocks, just varying the timestamp. I mean, it's not that easy, by the way, but there is still a possibility. So if we move on, there are some more attacks with regards to network. Now, distributed DOS. So if you really look at it, if I ask a question on whether a DOS attack can happen on a blockchain, never. It's a distributed ledger. You cannot have a DOS. But a distributed DOS attack, a single person cannot do that. So if you have a pool of people who want to bring down the system, they can do that to kind of drive out the honest miners. So what can happen is, they can attack the honest miners blockchain or the mining nodes, and they can bring it down. And by virtue of doing that, they can also send faulty requests to these honest miners. At the end of the day, they will realize that these requests are not kind of honest, and they will kind of keep on moving on. after that, basically, if you look at a Sybil attack, it's a attack where a node or a miner will show himself that he has multiple nodes, he has multiple VMs, he has multiple IPs. So he will have multiple, or he will show that he has multiple across the globe, but he might not have, he's a single entity, but he'll kind of fake his identities across and try to kind of tamper with the blocks. Then Eclipse and net split attack is basically you kind of, if Rob is the victim and Carol is the attacker, she will try to isolate one of the customer, and she will never bring that person onto the network, on the public network. She will always try to kind of, all the blocks or all the transactions coming to her will be kind of tampered and they will not go through. Same is the case with, sorry. Yeah, same is the case with, see, routing attack, where routing attack is very serious, where some hackers can actually partition the blockchain completely. They will not let one partition to talk to the other partition, by which they can create that 51% of stake, in the, or more, maybe 60% of the stake in the computing. And they can kind of completely dominate this entire network. Also, routing attack can look at introducing delays in the propagation of the blocks of the transactions as well. So these were some of the key challenges. I mean, when we kind of evaluate a platform, say whether be it a Bitcoin or Ethereum or Ripple, these are some of the things that we can look at. I mean, of course, we will not be able to get directly on their website, but certainly by doing some research, we will be able to understand what those key parameters are with these operators. So coming to approaches, basically, what kind of steps or what kind of approach with respect to exchange and platforms? Important, and before talking about anything, provisions. So they should have a provision to ensure that they demonstrate that the exchanges to show that they control enough Bitcoins to settle all of its customer accounts. In case of a hack, the exchange should always have that provisioning mechanism. I mean, if you have this somewhere in the website or somewhere in your agreement written that they have this kind of, this is the safest bit then. Then in case the entire thing gets hacked, you are still kind of safe there. Double spending and race, in fact here insertion of observers communicating double spending alerts to nearby peers, and merchant in fact should not be taking 2 or 3 confirmations. Typically 6 to 7 confirmations are required. I mean, if you have 6 to 7 confirmations, you are safe. So that is what it is. From a pool mining perspective, you should include trusted miners in the pool, dissolve and close a pool where the revenue drops from the expected. And of course, cryptographic commitment schemes to ensure there is no bribery happening. In fact, there is one more on bribery where the rewards for the honest miners are kind of enough, they don't get involved in the bribery. Now for time jacking, there are multiple ways to look at network time protocol, then time stamping, sampling of time, values received from trusted peers. I think multiple checks and balances can be done to kind of look at that. And routing attacks basically increase the diversity of node connections. Monitoring of the round trips basically from source to destination, I think that becomes important. Now from an end consumer perspective, as from our perspective, wallet theft basically. So you can have you need to ensure that there is a 2-factor authentication enabled. You can have a facial or a voice recognition enabled as a second factor. You can have hardware wallets, trusted zone-backed Bitcoin wallets. Then password protected secret sharing, a kind of a mechanism. So if you have all these features provided by any of these Bitcoin providers, I think this is again a safe place. Secure your device to secure your holdings. I mean, extremely important in this. You have that key with you and you have to kind of secure your key. Protecting your private key. And of course, Finney, I told, waiting for the multiple confirmations for transactions. So I think I'm trying to kind of sum up or summarize what can be done by the providers and what can be done by the end consumers to really make ourselves safe. This was the kind of the last slide. Any specific questions you might have? I'd be happy to take that up. I know it's pretty late.
Any questions, folks, quickly? We've got a lawyer waiting for giving the next session for us. So be aware of the timings.
Hi, thanks for this. I just wanted to ask you, you mentioned something about China, that
Yeah.
4 miners can collaborate together, but I'd read somewhere that the government has asked them to dismantle it. So is that true? And
It's not yet done.
Okay.
It's not yet done.
Any other questions, folks? No more questions?
Okay, thank you guys. I hope this was informative.
Thank you.
Thanks.